bodies are bodies in some sense, and this is a fat one that I currently inhabit.
You currently inhabit.
Right?
Do you remember any others?
Hi, this is A Smaller Life, a podcast hosted by me, Saskia de Feiter. I am a small business owner who wants to grow by going smaller and choose better to do better. Join me on my journey where I figure out how I can make my needlecraft business relevant in this era and in my personal life.
Sarah Krentz, aka Swanky Emu Knits, designs knitting patterns that automatically adapt to your unique set of measurements, no size limits, no body proportion assumptions, just truly size-inclusive garments for everyone. She uses her math and design talent to help people fit their garments better. Naturally, I had to talk to her. So, Sarah, what would you say if I called you fat?
I think the first thing that comes to mind is that it is so context dependent, right? Like I describe myself as fat, but it's really weird as as you're asking it, and I'm thinking, I definitely call myself fat and use that word a lot more when I'm talking about knitting and garments and clothing and things like that. In my just day to day, with friends or day job work or things like that, I think I use it a lot less. And I don't know if that's just context or comfort or whatever. And so much of it really just depends on context. Like if you're talking about, designing garments for fat folks like me, it's a neutral thing. It's a description. I'm a larger person, right? Yeah. It has so much more loaded meaning in other contexts. And I don't know that necessarily, if one of those came my way, it so depends on, the person and what they're getting at. But it's a neutral word. It's a description. It's a size, I am a large person. I am a fat person.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to have value to it.
No, like tall.
Right, short, right. And even just talking about various proportions and things like that, like those are all neutral things. You may like things or not like things or, want different things, but bodies are bodies in some sense. And this is a fat one that I currently inhabit.
You currently inhabit.
Right.
Do you remember any others? I'd be curious what the difference is because I also currently inhabit a fat body.
Right? Well,
I'm even curious, I have to say. I don't necessarily need to be in a smaller body or thin body right now, but I am curious what it feels like.
Well, and I get for me, I have been a smaller person as an adult-ish kind of thing. And so I have some of that contrast of just how people treat me and talk to me and look at me. And it is mind-bogglingly different. Yeah. Like I'm the same person. If anything, I know more and I'm smarter now than I was 20 years ago. But the way that people see you and treat you, it's so different.
It is
so different.
Yeah. Also, those chairs on the terraces, but that's a whole different topic.
Right? Or flying on an airplane. It's just stuff is not designed for a wide range of body types.
No. And that's where you come in with Swanky Emu Knits. You design for a wider range of body sizes. Can I just read from your website?
Sure.
Okay. It says, everyone deserves to wear something that is both tailored to their shape and that makes them look and feel amazing. I definitely am an emotional type of person, and I have, like everybody else, certain times that I'm more emotional than other times, but this sentence literally brought a tear to my eye when I read it first, because it's so important. Everybody deserves something that fits them well.
Yeah.
And the textile industry is not equipped.
No.
They're not doing that.
No.
Okay. So what is it you do? And can you tell us a little bit about the journey to where you are right now?
Sure. So I am an indie knitwear designer. I really love designing sweaters and tops in particular. That's my jam. I have been knitting most of my life, more than 30 years at this point. I learned as a kid and kind of, picked it up and put it down along with a lot of other crafty things most of my life. I come from a kind of crafty family. But in the last 5 to 10 years, I've gotten a lot more into knitting in particular and making garments and making things for me. My wife also is a harder to fit body type. The regular sizes don't tend to work for her either. And so I've made garments for me and for her and really found it interesting, what kinds of things need to be tweaked and modified to have the same look essentially on both of us, and then taking personal style into that. So I guess 3 or 4 years ago now, I was in a big garment knitting kind of groove, and I knit what became the winter tee, which is the one I'm wearing right now. And I knitted it up. I put mine on. It's like, I love this. I think other people might actually love this. And I had just been itching to try to actually publish something, of not just make something a one-off for me, but really put it out there and see if anybody else was into what I'm into. So I put it together and, was going back to all my notes and all my math and kind of looking at, how I got to, I know how to fit me. I know my measurements and how to do all that. And so I was looking at all of that, and I was starting to look at sizing charts and grading and things like that. And so how to really make this a real pattern. And obviously I went into it knowing I wanted it to fit a wide range of bodies. And so when I started looking at like sizing charts and that kind of thing, of basically some of the references you use when you're going to grade stuff out, it just didn't sit right. It's hard to find ones with a pretty big wide range of sizes. They're always split into a gender binary, which people are not. And when I was looking, even when I was finding stuff of like, okay, if I'm sizing it up, even to include my size, if I was going by standard reference stuff, I was going to put out a sweater that I would have had to modify the crap out of to wear again. Like it just didn't sit right. And so I took that step back of like, I want to publish this. I want to do this. And how can I do that? And so I went back to that math that I had used, and I essentially just gave the math away. And so then it didn't matter if you were a reference size or not. There's no upper size limit because math just keeps going, right? That's all it is.
Yeah.
And it seems to work really, really well. You have a few key measurements that you need and a few key pieces of math that go along with all of that. And I originally started writing it out. My very first pattern, this one, it looks like algebra homework. Like you can see the actual calculations. And I have also been an educator, a math teacher in particular in a former life. And I know how intimidating that is to people. And so I didn't want to just put that out, and it's not to some, but it is very much to some other folks. And so I was trying to think of what's the easiest way to give this math to folks and to have it work. And so if they want to know what's going on and see all of it, they can, but if they don't, and they really just want kind of a, like, I just want to knit it and go pattern, and a spreadsheet came to mind because it's not low tech, but it's pretty easy to do some of the basic calculation pieces like that. It's easy to open and use. I didn't have to learn coding and do this on a website or an app or something that's a little beyond my skill set. And it seemed to work well. People liked it. People were interested in knitting it. And from there on out, that's how I design garments. So I'm not doing anything any differently.
Yeah, it's so smart. Did you think like, Eureka, I found somebody that nobody else found? How did you feel like this? Because designing as a process already has that little bit of a woo built inside, right? Where you have this problem in your head that you want solved, and by the end of the design process, the problem is solved, and then that's your high. That's I think for me it has been, that's the high in designing. But figuring out to do a super size inclusive way on spreadsheets, which people that are not super calcy, that's not a word, numbery, can figure out, that's a big thing.
And that to me felt so good, because there are tons of people who are, super experienced at garment making, sewing, knitting, crocheting. They know their measurements, they know how to take a standard pattern and like tweak it so it's going to be for them perfectly. And I hate that that's what it takes to make really good fitting stuff. And so I really wanted to see if there was a way to do that, more easily and more straightforward. And it's a weird, I feel like I'm always flipping back and forth between like, this is a cool and new angle on all of this. And at the same time, it's just the math that you use to make garments. That's as old as people and clothing itself. Like there's nothing new about your gauge times a measurement gives you a number of stitches.
True. But I am one of those people, and I changed my wording on this. I like to say I am somebody who hasn't practiced enough math, instead of I'm somebody that doesn't do math, because I was just not supported as a child in it was like, it's just not your thing. You stick to the creative stuff. But now with my own children, I like to say it's just a thing you can practice and a thing you can learn with the right support and, I guess, gusto a little bit.
I love that. No, I love that. And not everybody wants to, like, and I think it's totally fair to want to knit and do creative things and not want to do the math.
Because I'm a good knitter. I'm an accomplished knitter. I can knit things. I can change things around. I can do the math, but I also use knitting as a way to really relax and to step back from work. And sometimes doing the math feels like work to me. So then it's amazing to just have a spreadsheet where you because basically what you do is you take your measurements, you put your measurements in. I've got it here in front of me, and then it just it just spits everything out.
Yep. And each pattern has slightly different measurements that it needs because of how the fit and how the design is. And that's something that always is different from design to design, but it's also different from designer to designer. About a year after publishing the first pattern, I started feeling like, there's more to this than I will ever be able to do as one person. And so maybe I could teach other people how to do it too, which has been so awesome. Fun. So fun.
Then how do people come to you? Do designers come to you saying that they want to learn how to do it in your way? Because as you said before, I think a year or 3 ago, there was a lot of interest in opening up the world for more size inclusive patterns within, at least in the knitting community. I'm mostly in the knitting community and not so much crochet. And then designers started offering more and more size, quote unquote, size inclusive patterns. But as you said, some of them have what you call the body proportion assumptions. Is that right?
Yeah.
Can you say a little bit about that? And what's the difference between, let's say, a general knitting pattern that is size inclusive? I'm very glad that they make these patterns with a range of sizes, but yours are different in a way.
Yes.
Hello, friends. I just want to say something to you quickly. So if you're liking the podcast, if you're liking what I'm talking about, consider joining the mailing list. I have bi-weekly updates on the podcast and or business insights and tips. The occasional exercise to get you ahead. If you want to actually talk to other business owners about the things that I talk about here on the podcast, why not become a Yavol community member for as little as €8.50 a month? That's like buying me coffee and a croissant. But don't do it for me though. Do it for yourself, because I promise that you will get something out of it, either the emails and or the community. So you can either go to the show notes or sign up through yavol.myflowdesk.com/patternshift. I hope you'll join us.
Yes. So a general or kind of standardly graded knitting pattern, even when it is very size inclusive and has a range of sizes, kind of by default, it's like going to the store and picking something up off the rack. All of the proportions of the garment have already been decided. And they're usually based on like a bust or a chest measurement, kind of one or two really key measurements. And then from there, if you want something different, you want much smaller arms or need a much smaller neck or something like that, it's on you to bring those modifications in. And usually designers have some sort of kind of standard-ish that they use so that their proportions are always roughly the same from their garment to their garment. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. It is like going to the store and grabbing something off the rack. Plenty of things will fit that way, or, you can make it work.
Yeah.
The way that my spreadsheet pattern works is that it kind of considers all of those body parts separately, so that, just because you have a certain bust or a chest measurement, it doesn't mean your neck or your arms or your waist are in proportion with that, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
I have very, very narrow shoulders, a wide rib cage, and a really wide waist.
Yeah.
Standard design template-y things like never ever fit me because my shoulders are 6 sizes smaller than my waist and all of that. And so it was somewhat of a selfish problem solving of, I know I'm going to have to modify patterns in this way because it's why stuff never fits me in the upper body. And so why not just kind of build that in and bake that in? And so it's why you're taking an arm measurement and a chest measurement and a waist measurement or something like that, because the spreadsheet is considering all of those separately and then also making sure they can flow together and play together and not, wind up with 20 extra stitches all of a sudden.
Exactly. Yes.
That's the hard part. Honestly, that's the hard part, because you're considering all possibilities of that, not just the one that works with the proportion that you kind of started with.
Yeah, I can imagine, because on one hand you think, okay, so you have the spreadsheet, so you're done. But that's not the case, because what if, and it's so easy to imagine that somebody would have a small chest and big arms the other way around. Like it's not even that hard to imagine. It's not like crazy body types.
Not
like
at
there
all.
are no crazy body types, but it's not
uncommon.
It's so exactly.
Yeah.
It's not uncommon. And then going from a tiny chest to really big arms, like building the bridge between, let's call it that way, between the breasts and the arms. I'm now pointing at my boobers. That is where it gets hard. So it's definitely something, if you want to do this in your designing, it's something you need to learn. And you now also offer, is it a course or workshops?
It's a class. Yeah. I do it's a 4-week, so over the course of a month, we meet once a week live for a couple of hours, and really, I've broken it down into kind of steps and things to look for and kind of how to look at all of it to get at what you need and to make sure it all kind of comes together as a cohesive unit. And it's something too that is, still evolving as more people take the class, as more people design kind of in this framework. People are bringing in stuff that I never would have thought of, or problem solving things that I don't know that I could have alone. It's awesome.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking, because it's bound to become a community effort in a way, because one designer has a completely different skill set than another and a completely different aesthetic than another. And I'm wrapping my head around, because I'm not a big cable knitter or lace for that matter. That would be very complicated, I would say. But is it doable in this?
Yes.
It is doable.
It is.
Here we go. People.
It's the same. To me, at least, I see it as the same kind of balance that you would do if you were designing something and we're going to grade it in a standard way. There is a difference between designing something that's going to be a lot of different sizes and just making a one-off beautiful garment, because you have to think about how things are scaling up, scaling down, and all of that. And so you still, if a spreadsheet, you still have to think about those things and think about how you as a designer want to handle them. Do you want the cables to be the same proportion on everyone, or are you okay okay with more blank space on either side as things go up or down. It's some of the same trade-offs. They just look a little different.
Yeah. So that means that basically any designer could learn how to work with this and make it their own.
Yes. And it might
such good news.
It might mean that their designs look a little different than they originally intended.
Obviously, I mean, that would be the case, but that is the idea, right?
Just like they might look a little different if they scaled them up or down further than their current range.
Yes.
So, and that's, I realistically, I know that that's not a trade-off all designers want to make. And that's not something, not every knitter wants to knit something new and interesting and different.
Exactly.
So I think there's still space for both, but traditionally graded stuff really just leaves out a lot a that can be much harder.
So we need to get you in front of all the designers so they at least know of you and have the opportunity to make the choice, because obviously you can make the choice. You don't have to.
Right.
But this is my personal opinion. In this day and age, I feel I have so much more to choose from than I had before, that I already feel like I have enough, because my view on life, this podcast is called A Smaller Life, is to try and to have rather a few good things or items or people for that matter in your life than a whole bunch of crap shit.
I like that.
So if a few good designers find their way to you, I hope more. That would be a gift in itself.
And I don't want to downplay, it's a lot of work. It's hard. There are ones that are still stumping me that I'll get there eventually, but it is hard because you're doing some of the grading and the tech editing and those kind of steps with the design as well. And I know there are plenty of designers who knit their prototype and then have a tech editor grade it for them because the tech editor is the expert in that, right? Use experts. Absolutely. So my hope is that as the framework grows and as more people are involved, we get a little closer to that kind of model as well, where there might be folks, and I know there are folks who have taken the class who have already expressed interest in doing exactly this, of, they can take someone else's and turn it into the spreadsheet and do all of this, because I don't think it's realistic that every designer wants to learn how to spreadsheet and how to do this. It's just not everybody's thing, and that's cool.
I have Allie, hi Allie, to edit this podcast.
Exactly.
I know how to do it, but she's much better at it. And I can put my talent towards trying not to trip over my words.
Exactly.
So that's how that goes.
Exactly.
And we talk about this great, let's call it an invention of yours. But I also want to talk about your designs.
Sure.
Because you have a bunch of designs you are wearing right now.
I am wearing the winter tee, which was my very first published design. And I think just because of what it is for that, I think it might always be my favorite. It was just the first one, and it was exactly what I had in my head. And I love it so much. I love all of the things that I've made. I designed for myself first and foremost. And so I think some of my somewhat vintage, somewhat whimsical, somewhat kind of classic preppy style all weirdly comes together in various designs.
I have to agree.
I never know how to describe it.
No, that was great.
Good.
We'll write it down for you.
It's basically whatever I feel like I want in my closet at that moment of what don't I have? And a lot of it is, okay, what haven't I been able to find, off the rack or I stopped looking at a lot of other people's garment patterns a long time ago because it was just so frustrating that they didn't fit me and needed so much modification.
Yeah, that can be heartbreaking. What we do in the Yabble community is slowly but steadily, without overwhelm and with some focus, we are working on our conscious wardrobes and focused on knitting, but we recently started a sewing group within the community, and we also have a spinning group. And so kind of the different techniques are taking their place in the community. And the idea is that you look at your wardrobe, you look at what you have, you keep what you have for as long as you can, but it has to make you feel good and it has to make you confident. You don't wear things that make you sad or shake in your confidence. We don't want that. And then, as you said, like filling the gaps with the things that really make you feel good, where you can have control over where to find the materials, who to support when you buy the patterns, all those kinds of things. So we're trying to be wardrobe angels and doing it with the values that are most important to each and every one of us. So you decide yourself what your values are. We're not going to judge. So your designs are perfect for that. I myself have the singularity on my list and I have it right in front of me. Yay. And I love it mainly also because it's the style that you described just now, but also because it's a great stash buster.
Yes, it is.
Can you describe what it looks like?
Yeah, it's I do a lot of short sleeved stuff. I live in Nashville, Tennessee, which gets really, really hot in the summer and it gets cold in the winter, but not for very long and not that cold, especially compared to other places I've lived. So I wind up with a lot of short sleeve stuff. The Singularity is it's a short sleeve kind of off the shoulder drop sleeve kind of tee with this really, it looks like an intricate stripe design, but it's actually deceptively simple. And you need at least 3 colors, but you can have, 20 colors in it if you want. The charts and the instructions will kind of show you how to layer all of them. And so nobody's ever looks alike. You can stash bust, especially I always wind up with like one skein of something. It's beautiful. I needed it from the yarn shop or the show or whatever it was, but I don't want another hat. I don't want another tiny shawl or something like that. So what on earth do I do with it? So that's where that pattern came from and just how to put all those together. And I like that nobody's will ever look the same.
Yeah, I love it. I've already gone stash diving, but I'm not completely, I don't know if I want it super, super colorful, which I always like, or a more neutral variant. I will have to have another look. But when you buy one of your patterns, you get a PDF and the spreadsheet.
Correct. Some of that came out of necessity. A lot of places like Ravelry that sell patterns only let you do PDFs. And so I couldn't just stick everything in a spreadsheet and sell it in popular places. So it kind of came out of necessity, but it's worked really well. So the PDF will always contain the pretty pictures and the description and any kind of and finishing instructions and all the bits and bobs that you would usually see in a pattern. And then if the platform will let me, you get the spreadsheet at the same time. Otherwise, there's a link or something to go download it, and the spreadsheet contains the guts of the pattern itself. Here's the measurements you need. On more recent patterns, I've actually done a lot of, you can actually input your gauge as well from a fixed range, not an infinite open box. So you put in your gauge, you put in your measurements, and then the rest of the pattern just magically fills in the spreadsheet.
Just can't wait. So much fun. That's what it really feels like to me. It looks like fun. It looks like it's going to be easy. It's going to be fun. And the hard work is done by somebody else.
I hope so. That's my intention. And that's that kind of fun and joy. That's what I get out of knitting. And that's what I try to put into knitting.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that seems to come through. It cracks me up when people think I'm very serious because I'm not at all.
That's what you get when you work with spreadsheets.
Yes. I mean, I'm a science person. I'm a math person. Like, I think I can have clearly a serious persona at some points or something.
I think they have a bad rap when you're a math and science person when it comes to humor.
Especially as a woman. Yeah, it's a weird space to be in. It's a very weird space to be in.
All those spaces we work in, right? I wanted to ask you, when I look at the spreadsheet, you have a nice little drawing of a person, a figure that shows you how to measure for the pattern. And I was wondering if you could talk us through measuring and give us a few tips for measuring for those who don't really know what to do.
Absolutely. Yeah, that can be, I think, an intimidating part of a pattern like this. And this varies from designer to designer. Certainly, one of the things that I personally try to do in my patterns is to have measurements that are more straightforward to take, especially on yourself. Like, you can get into very intricate diagonal and all sorts of things that, if you're a tailor or different kinds of garments, you can get into. So I intentionally try to keep them pretty straightforward. I have a lot of things that are circumferences, your chest circumference, your arm circumference, because they're a little easier to take on yourself and you're not trying to figure out what's the front half and things like that. The biggest thing, I try to throw this in the pattern as well, is to wear the undergarments that you would wear under a finished garment. So, if you're wearing a bra that would lift things or pad things or squish things or whatever, that they're in images. That padded, lifted, squished position. And if you don't need any of that, don't bother.
No, don't even. If you don't need it, this also another topic, just don't.
Honestly, through the pandemic in the last few years, I have stopped wearing a bra 95% of the time. And so the next time I take measurements for a garment, I'm going to measure the unbroad version, because I think that's just a realistic how I'm going to dress.
These are all my unbroad sweaters. These are my broad sweaters.
Right? And at least for me, it's not that different, which helps. But for some folks, that can be quite a different silhouette. Yeah. But so wear what you're going to, what would go under the garment, and then take your measurement, not too tight, not too loose. You don't want to be able to get a whole hand between you and the measuring tape, but you don't want to be so tight you're squishing things.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I have to remind myself as well is that knitting is stretchy and squishy. And so if your measurement's a little off, it'll be totally fine.
Yes.
The sweater that I'm wearing, actually, my chest size was 3 or 4 inches smaller, I think, when I made this several years ago. And, I'm wearing it today. It's stretched, it fits, just you would never know the difference.
Yeah. So err on the small side then.
Even,
yeah.
I suppose at least for my style, I would, but I would just not stress so much of is it this half inch or this quarter inch or this centimeter? It's going to be okay.
Yeah.
Be consistent and it's going to be okay.
I'm super curious because I haven't knit a pattern from you yet. I have it in front of me because someone in my community pointed your work out to me. It was just a couple of weeks ago. And I just, when I talk about my body proportions or whatever, people would say you are in proportion, which is everything is big. Basically, that's what it means. But my boobs are definitely not in proportion with my shoulders. But shoulders are something that people don't really take in consideration. Mm-hmm. So I've learned from over a decade of knitting that it's better for me to measure over the boob.
Yep.
So that my shoulders fit.
Yes.
And the boobs will stretch out the fabric a little bit, but that's fine. And you can also add some stitches and darts and whatever, but that's a little bit too complicated for now. I think your way of grading would work a lot better for me, and also specifically for the arms, because that's always a thing, right? They forget.
That's for everybody. That's not even just for fat folks.
No, people forget arms. Arms are there. I mean, if you're over 18, but especially if you're over 40, there's arms that are there and hanging and need space to be.
And they vary so much. There's no correlation between a chest size and an arm size. There's just not. And so, and I've seen other folks who are doing still more traditionally graded stuff, but they give several arm options or several yoke options. That's really cool to see too. It's the same idea, the same train of thought of people come in different proportions. So what can we do to make it a little bit easier for someone to knit a garment for their proportions?
Yeah. And if you think about people that are really small, really tiny, I'm immediately thinking the thing that always comes up, a lot less yarn.
Yes.
So in your patterns, how do you deal with differences in yarn amounts?
I rely heavily on folks who test knit for me to kind of let me know how much yarn they used. And then again, because I'm spreadsheety, mathy, I do some interpolation and extrapolation from that and try to give some kind of rough estimates.
Right.
But I always also try to be very clear of, the whole garment is custom to you. And so if you have a wide chest and tiny arms, you're going to use a little less yarn than someone with a wide chest and big arms. And so I kind of try to present it as this is a rough yardage, usually just based on a chest size or an over chest size or something like that. A couple of the patterns more recently, I have been trying to play around with having the spreadsheet do the yardage calculation for you. It seems to be working okay. It's one of those, again, it can be a lot of work for just a little bit of reward. But on the back end, then the spreadsheet is taking into account, all of those measurements and basically the surface area of the garment you're making and how much yardage at your gauge that should take. If I'm not mistaken, Singularity is the one that really played around with that the most. So yeah, as stuff evolves too, I want to go back and throw that in all of the older patterns. But that's been my approach to yardage so far.
Yeah, and you can always knit another color board. Dutch name, English. What's it?
The ribbing, the hems.
Thank you. All right. So there's a few more things that I'm very curious about. When we look at the business side of things, I looked at your website and it looks darn professional to me.
My goodness, so thank you.
Good. From a marketing perspective, it's almost perfect. It looks you know what you're doing. How did you know what to do? How to write what on your website?
Seriously, thank you so much. That the business side of things is the piece that I feel like I don't know what on earth I'm doing. It does not come naturally. It takes me forever. And some of it, I think, is just kind of building it and tweaking it over time. Some of the statements and things on my website, like about size inclusivity, about me, that was fairly straightforward. This is how I feel about this, and it's just going to all pour out into a paragraph or two or whatever. But some of the other things of, arranging and just making it look polished, same with patterns for that matter. I don't feel like that's my strong suit. And I put a lot of work into it for mediocre in places.
It really communicates.
I'm glad.
It really works. And especially the statements, they grab you and you're like, yeah, hell yeah. And you want to know more. And then you don't overwhelm people with pages and pages of information. It's what you need to get inspired and to want to know more. So it's really, really good. But you didn't take any course or business book addicts.
My background is in teaching, first and foremost. I'm an educator, have been for a long time in math and science in particular. And I think I do apply that lens to a lot of stuff of how do I want to get this across clearly? And so I spend a lot of time thinking about it. I think maybe that's where some of the clarity hopefully is coming from, of just
you clearly have a talent for it.
Thank you. I did recently, I actually haven't finished it. I purchased a couple-hour workshop class on pattern layout in particular. And it's killing me. I cannot remember the tech editor's name who puts on the class.
Will, and we'll put it in the show notes.
Awesome. So I haven't quite finished it yet, but that is something, layout and making that kind of polish piece, the visual piece rather than the content piece, I think is something I am still learning a lot about and want to get a lot better at. And I'm excited to kind of learn more in that arena, because I don't feel like that piece comes as naturally at all.
What would be then the first thing you would want to dive into and learn more about? If I would give you $3,000 to spend on a business course, what would the course be about?
Oh, one of the things I'm really curious about is how and if it's possible to scale this up into a full-time, sustainable, actual business that employs me. I work a day job. It's great for stability and security and all of that. And clearly it's a job that gives me a lot of free time to knit and to do these kinds of things. But the dream is always to do this and only this. and have this, be my income and my business and things. And it's not quite there. That wouldn't be a sustainable living right now. I know it's a hard one for anyone to do and to be in that space full time for sure, especially right now. So I think that would be one of the things that I would really, really want to dive into. And, it may not be possible. The economy, capitalism works the way it does. Like, it may not be possible. I want to do it no matter what, but
yeah, it's a big one. This is a big one. It's basically what this whole podcast is about. It's like, how do you have a sustainable business that sustains you as a person, have a comfortable income, also have enough time to be creative and not burn out, and offer products that feel like you are asking for fair prices.
Yeah.
And I think one of the hardest parts in this is the fact that we as makers or sellers or people that offer services or products, we are so close to the makers because we usually are a maker, that we feel bad for asking prices that really we should ask.
Yes.
So there's a discrepancy there that is just really hard. You're basically asking your friends to pay you a price that sustains you.
Yeah.
In the same way that they get paid for their day jobs.
Yeah.
And that is such a weird thing to wrap your head around as a maker as well as a seller. It's just, this is my thing. I love to talk about this, and I love to take everyone's pillow and shake it up and wake them up and ask for more money, spend more money, buy less, but buy the good things with the good people. Just don't collect. Think about it, and then offer the money that you want to spend to somebody that did good work, right?
Yeah.
That's basically what it boils down to.
Yeah. And that's not the way society is structured right now for lots of reasons.
But it's also not really hard to disrupt it.
It's true. That's true.
It's a mind shift, if anything. And because with the same amount of money, if you just spend it differently, it's the same amount of money. You don't have to get another job right. It's just spending more time educating yourself, being open to finding and supporting people that could use your support or that invented a really cool spreadsheet or have a really cool business circle and online community, things like that. And I wondered, do you have a strategy to find people to buy your patterns or your class?
That's actually the other thing that should have probably been my answer to the previous question. I should, and I don't. And it's working for now, but I do know that that's one of the things that if I want to keep growing and things, that kind of, I don't know, marketing, advertising, that kind of plan, it just does not come naturally to me. Yeah. I get very into whatever I'm working on, and then it's a finished object and pattern, and then I move on to the next thing. I'm really bad about looping back of oh yeah, remember this one and remember this one. And it feels not genuine. It doesn't flow. So that is another piece of probably should, but don't have a huge one currently.
a lot of business owners in our realm of knitting, needlecraft, they experience the same thing. I've interviewed a bunch of them, some really big names, sometimes people are really well known. And they run really small businesses and they struggle a lot with things that people on the outside of the gram, they think, oh, it all looks so pretty. And it really does. But there's a lot of facets to business, and there's a lot of different talents and different people that know different things. So we can all help each other and lift each other up, because I don't know my way around numbers yet. But I'm really good at marketing and communication. So I think having a good network of different people that can help you out in certain places is key and very important to collect a community of like-minded makers around you. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I wanted to ask you, I always say it's the last question and then I come up with some more, but My planned last question is Swanky Emu ?
You are not alone.
Really? Love it though. Love it. I just don't know why yet.
One of these days, I'm going to come up with this really complex, awesome backstory to it. My name is Sarah Elizabeth Krentz. It's my initials. I couldn't come up with anything, and I wanted it to be kind of ridiculous like I am. And so it's literally my initials.
Oh my God. That is hilarious. That is hilarious. And it's such a good name.
Thank you. I feel like it suits me. It's a little off the wall and doesn't quite make sense. And it's just silly, which I think is me.
Sarah, do you want to know what my first business name was?
Yes.
It was Sauce Knits It Again. Like it was in the oops, I did it again type of vibe, but it's also Sauce K-E. It's my initials as well.
I love it.
Which I really, at the time, I wasn't so internationally focused. So it didn't make a lot of sense to have an English name. And now, which this happens a lot to me. And now I have Jawohl, which is basically yes, wool, and also German for yes.
Such a good name.
But it's great that you know, that you understand it, because it wasn't planned to be something that English speakers would understand. So I kind of switched things around, but I'm just keeping it. It's fine.
I love it.
Sarah, thank you so much for explaining about your awesome way of designing full-sized patterns. And I can't wait to start knitting. Thank you.
No,
Good
thank
luck
you.
And everything.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for having me. I can't wait to see what you knit either. It never gets old to me seeing someone else knit something that came out of my head. It's bizarre and amazing to see every single time. So I can't wait to
send you lots
knit.
of photos.
Please do. Thank you.
If you own a business that fits the narrative, you can become a sponsor of the show. My advertisement rates are pretty darn good right now, so get in touch via info@ja-wol.com. I had a really fun time talking to Sarah. I think as a value-driven professional, she sets a great example. I love her work. Thank you, Sarah. One of the easiest things you can do to support the podcast is to leave an honest review on Apple Podcasts. Subscribe to the podcast on the platform of your choice so you'll never miss an episode, and share. Share it in your social network, or even just mentioning it over coffee with a friend. I'm only one person, and I count on you to help me spread the message. Thanks for listening to A Smaller Life. Remember to choose, and choose consciously.